I was at the gym the other morning, watching this guy, early 30s, looked like a corporate lawyer, very composed, trying to squeeze out one last rep on the bench press. He was stuck. The bar was hovering just inches above his chest, shaking violently, and it looked like his body had simply reached its absolute mechanical limit. His face was turning a deep, alarming purple, but the iron wouldn't budge. Then something weird happened. He didn't drop the weight or call for a spotter. Instead, he let out this absolute torrent of the foulest, most creative profanity I've heard in years. It wasn't just a grunt. It was a deliberate, vitriolic blast of taboo words. And the moment those words left his mouth, the bar shot up. It didn't just move. It looked like he'd suddenly found a hidden reserve of power he didn't have 5 seconds ago. After he racked the weights, he went right back to being that composed, polite professional, wiping down the equipment as if nothing had happened. But that transformation stayed with me. It was like watching someone flip a switch between two different versions of a human being. We're taught from childhood that swearing is a sign of losing control, a low-class breakdown of logic and manners. But watching him, it felt like the exact opposite. It looked like he hadn't lost control. He'd used those words to take it. It makes you wonder, why does breaking a social rule about language suddenly give our muscles permission to break the rules of physics? We like to think of ourselves as the masters of our own strength, but that gym encounter suggested something much more unsettling. It suggested that there is a governor inside our brains, a silent observer that's constantly holding us back for our own good, and that the only way to bypass it is to say the one thing we're never supposed to say. Okay, so let's unpack this. We're diving deep into the biological and the psychological mechanisms behind that exact transformation.
Right.
We really want to know how language, and not just any language, but specifically taboo language, can act like a neural override switch.
A switch to bypass the mind's internal governor, as you put it.
Exactly. To access these hidden reserves of power. This deep dive is really about understanding the architecture of control inside our own brains.
And to find that override switch, we first have to locate the control panel itself. The governor doesn't really live in one single spot in the brain.
No.
It's more in the fundamental way your brain processes information, which means we have to look at that great divide between the conscious and the subconscious mind.
Okay, so we're talking about the classic cognitive architecture model, the iceberg analogy, right?
Exactly. That little tip of the iceberg that you can see above the water, that's your conscious mind.
The part we think is in charge.
The part we think is everything. But it represents maybe 10% of your total mental activity on a good day. It's the part of you that's listening to us right now, actively analyzing our words, judging.
Setting goals, like remembering to buy milk on the way home.
Right. It's the manager, the executive function.
But it's a manager with some pretty serious limitations, from what I understand.
It is a remarkably slow one, and it has to be. It has to be careful, deliberate, because its processing speed is incredibly limited. We measure it at around 40 bits of information per second.
40. That's it. That sounds wildly inefficient.
It is. And it focuses pretty much entirely on short-term memory. We're talking maybe 20 seconds worth of information. It can only truly handle 1, maybe 3 tasks at the same time.
And it's always stuck in time, isn't it?
That's a crucial point. The conscious mind is always thinking in the past and the future. It's dwelling on yesterday's mistake or planning tomorrow's schedule.
So if our brain is the most powerful computer we know of, why would we evolve such a slow bottleneck right at the top?
Because that slowness, that bottleneck, is a survival mechanism. Imagine if you were truly receiving and processing all the raw sensory input from the world around you.
Millions of bits per second. Exactly.
You would be completely incapacitated, just overwhelmed by noise, by stimuli. The conscious mind has to filter. That's its primary job. It imposes order, it looks for patterns, and it prioritizes what it thinks are threats, so you can actually take focused action instead of just freezing up.
So the filtration is the governor.
It's the core function of the governor, yes.
Okay, but if that's just the manager, just 10%, what about the real powerhouse, the 90% of the iceberg that's lurking below the waterline?
That is the subconscious mind. And it's not a manager. It's a vast data bank. This system stores everything.
Everything.
Every single belief you've ever held, every skill you've mastered, every memory, every experience, even the ones you were absolutely certain you've forgotten. Everything you've seen, done, felt, or thought. It's all in there.
And the processing power difference is just, it's staggering.
Well, it's estimated to handle around 4 million bits of information per second.
From 40 to 4 million?
And it can multitask thousands of events at the same time because it doesn't use that slow step-by-step logic. It works through pattern recognition and instant association. This is your gut feeling, your intuition, your innate guidance system.
It's fascinating that the slowest part of our mind, that conscious filter, is the part we identify with. That's what we think of as me.
And here's probably the most critical distinction when we're talking about control. The subconscious mind exists entirely in the present.
The present.
For the subconscious, there is no past or future. Everything is happening and now. It thinks literally and kind of ironically, because it's so vast and fundamental, it's highly resistant to change through normal conscious thought.
You can't just reason with it.
No, you can't just tell your subconscious, hey, stop being afraid of heights.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. It has to be convinced through a powerful emotional experience or through deep, repeated programming.
So the conscious mind is like this slow, cautious CEO, right? Trying to plan for the next quarter, worrying about safety regulations.
And the subconscious is the vast, instant, literal data center that only understands what's happening this very second and what needs to be done about it.
A data center with a massive, generally untapped reservoir of power and recall.
Precisely. Which brings us to those incredible examples, the savants, who seem to somehow bypass that 40 bits per second filter and just plug directly into the main database.
You're talking about people like Stephen Wiltshire.
Stephen Wiltshire is the perfect illustration. He's an autistic architectural artist. You can take him on a single 20-minute helicopter ride over a huge city like Tokyo or London.
Just once.
Just one flight. And then he can go back and recreate the entire cityscape with this astonishing photographic detail. He'll draw thousands of windows, tiny architectural features, complex curves, all of it completely from memory.
That level of detail, it suggests his mind literally stores every single piece of visual information it gets.
Yeah.
The rest of us, we see a cityscape, but our governor just immediately throws away 99% of that data as irrelevant noise.
It proves that the raw capacity is in there for all of us. That kind of photographic recall is a function of the subconscious just retaining everything. The filtration process, the governor, is what stops us from being like that, from being constantly overwhelmed by all that detail.
So it's a necessary evil. The governor is setting these physical and social limits for our own good, for our long-term, somatic maintenance.
It's trying to prevent injury, social embarrassment, mental overload.
Which brings us back to the gym. The question becomes, how do you strategically trick that safety mechanism into thinking a short-term survival burst is necessary, even when the only risk is dropping a weight on your chest?
Well, it sounds like you need a secret language, a language that skips the conscious filter entirely and speaks directly to the subconscious, to the emotional center.
And that takes us from the general architecture to the specifics, right? To the language centers of the brain and how the brain has sort of split up emotional meaning.
Yes, to what we call cerebral lateralization, the general functional split between the two hemispheres of the brain.
Okay, and we should probably put a little caveat here first. While we talk about these splits, modern neuroscience shows the brain is incredibly interconnected. Both sides are working together on almost everything.
That's a very important point. It's not a clean binary split. But we can still identify dominant functional areas. For most people, the left hemisphere is the dominant side. We often call it the thinker.
The logical side.
Yes, it handles sequential, analytical, logical processing. This is the side responsible for math, reading, formal language. It processes information in fragments, breaking down sentences into their components, analyzing words one by one.
So if you're reading a legal document or trying to assemble some IKEA furniture, your left hemisphere is firing on all cylinders.
Absolutely. And for controlled, deliberate speech, the kind that corporate lawyer was using before we started lifting, the left side is in charge. We have two really critical areas here. First is Broca's area.
Okay.
It's in the left frontal lobe, and it's responsible for your ability to speak. The sequencing of sounds, the motor mechanics of actually moving your mouth and tongue to form words.
And we know this because of what happens when it gets damaged, right?
Yes. You see something called expressive aphasia. The person can understand language perfectly, but they struggle terribly to produce structured sentences. Their speech is slow, it's halting, it often lacks grammar. It shows you just how much Broca's area is about organizing logical language output.
And then there's the comprehension part.
That's Wernicke's area, usually in the left temporal lobe. It's all about understanding language. Damage here causes receptive aphasia. The person can speak fluently, the words come out fine, but their speech often makes no sense. and they can't comprehend what they're reading or hearing.
So that entire left hemisphere setup is designed for the literal, logical, organized creation and interpretation of language.
Exactly. And both Broca's and Wernicke's are constrained by that governor we talked about. The governor's constantly analyzing, is this sentence socially appropriate? Is it logical? Does this action maximize my safety?
But the taboo word, the swear word, it seems to just bypass all of that complex left hemisphere analysis completely.
And that's what we call the affective bypass. Because while the left hemisphere is busy handling the literal content of language, the emotional meaning of language, its affective component that's controlled in the opposite hemisphere, the right side.
So what does the right side bring to the table if it's not the literal words?
It gives words their intonation, their affectation, the emotional shading that completely changes their meaning. There's an affective language area on the right side that's a mirror to Broca's. If you remove the right brain's involvement, all speech becomes flat, monotone, completely literal, no matter the context.
This reminds me of the classic example of sarcasm.
It's perfect. If someone says, oh, great, your left hemisphere just registers the words O-H-G-R-E-A-T, but if they say it with a cynical downward tone,
oh, great,
your right hemisphere registers that emotional effect, and it instantly signals the true meaning. This is terrible. The taboo word leverages that exact same emotional pathway, but with an immense amount of force.
So why do these conventional swear words have so much force? It's not the sounds themselves, is it?
No, not at all. It's because they have been imbued over decades with extremely high, usually negative emotional conditioning. The power isn't in the syllables. It's in the learned history of the word. From childhood, we are punished or shamed or socially corrected for using these words. And that process links the word directly to high emotional arousal and, crucially, to the autonomic nervous system.
So the taboo word doesn't wait around for Wernicke's area to analyze its linguistic structure or for the frontal lobe to judge the social consequences?
No, it hits the brain instantly.
Yeah.
As a purely emotional, almost survival level signal, it bypasses the standard, slow, logical processing pathways and dives straight into the limbic system.
Emotional core.
And when you hit that emotional system hard enough, you trigger the physiological override we call a hijack.
Okay, so now we're moving deep into the primal brain, the neurobiological overdrive. Let's talk about the amygdala. This seems to be the key structure in this whole operation.
The amygdala is absolutely central to any discussion of emotional triggers. It's an almond-shaped collection of nuclei, and it's nestled deep inside the temporal lobe. It basically functions as the brain's internal alarm system, its threat detector.
It's just constantly scanning the environment for danger.
Constantly. It responds most powerfully to things like expressions of fear, menacing looks from someone else, sudden loud noises, or in this case, a self-generated, extremely high arousal stimulus that has been deeply conditioned as forbidden.
The swear word.
Yes. And when the amygdala senses this, it instantly prepares the body for action by activating the sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system.
The classic fight or flight response.
The classic fight or flight.
So this is the moment the body decides it's time to find that hidden reserve of strength. What's the precise chemical cascade that happens once that alarm goes off?
The amygdala's output kicks off this massive multi-system chemical response. Within the brain, it releases a cocktail of neurotransmitters. You've got norepinephrine, acetylcholine, dopamine, serotonin.
A whole cocktail.
It floods the central nervous system. It makes the brain hyper-aware, sensitive, instantly reactive.
And what about for the body?
For the body, it triggers what's known as the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. This leads to the rapid release of stress hormones, primarily cortisol and epinephrine.
Which is adrenaline.
This is what prepares your muscles, accelerates your heart rate, and shifts all your blood resources to where they're needed most. Swearing, in this context, is basically a linguistic tool to self-dose with adrenaline and force your body into emergency mode.
But hold on, a key component of the governor is stability, right? How does the brain maintain that stability and stop us from overreacting to every little thing?
That's where the inhibitory system comes in, specifically something called GABAergic neurotransmission. GABA, or gamma-aminobutyric acid. It's the primary inhibitory neurotransmitter in the brain. It acts like a brake. It keeps the amygdala, the alarm system, from firing inappropriately. It prevents excessive anxiety and fear. It allows the rational parts of your brain to stay in control.
So in a normal, calm state, GABA is essentially protecting the conscious, rational filter. It's keeping the governor in charge.
That's a perfect way to put it. So the emotional signal from that taboo word has to be powerful enough to temporarily overwhelm the GABAergic brakes on the amygdala. And when the amygdala successfully takes over, it triggers the second and really crucial step of the hijack.
Which is the shutdown of the rational process.
The shutdown of the rational brain.
How does the brain physically do that? How does it shut down rationality?
It's a resource allocation decision.
Yeah.
And it's dictated by survival. The norepinephrine and cortisol that get released during this cascade, they combine to cause powerful vasoconstriction.
A narrowing of the blood vessels.
Exactly. And this dramatically decreases blood flow to specific regions, but most critically to the prefrontal cortex, especially a part called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, or DLPFC.
And the DLPFC is the seat of executive function. It's planning, working memory, rational thought.
It's the CEO's office. And if your ancient brain decides you need to fight a saber-toothed tiger right now, it does not want you sitting there calmly calculating the optimal angle of attack.
It wants instant, uninhibited reaction.
It wants action. So that decrease in blood flow to the frontal lobe is precisely why people struggle to think calmly or rationally when they are terrified or intensely angry.
Yeah.
The rational governor is temporarily denied the oxygen and glucose it needs to function.
So the amygdala hijack isn't just a metaphor, it's a literal physiological state where that strong emotional arousal caused by the taboo violation impairs the prefrontal cortex. It silences the rational mind and allows the body to push past those perceived limits that were designed for long-term safety.
It is strategic disinhibition. You are neurologically cutting the safety line.
Wow.
You're intentionally overriding the rational system to achieve a massive short-term physical output. This is the evolutionary neurobiology of state disinhibition. You're using the amygdala to bypass that prefrontal psychological governor.
Okay, so if this is a real biological phenomenon, a reliable chemical trigger, we should be able to measure it. In a lab, have researchers actually tried to quantify this increase in pain tolerance?
Oh, absolutely. And the results from these studies provide some of the clearest experimental proof for this whole mechanism. Researchers use something called the cold pressor paradigm.
The what?
The cold pressor paradigm. It's a standardized, very painful, but ultimately harmless stimulus. It just involves you immersing your hand in ice-cold water that's kept at about 3 to 5 degrees Celsius.
That sounds awful.
It is. And they compared two groups. One group repeating a conventional swear word over and over, and the other group repeating a neutral word.
What was the neutral word?
The control word was solid. A word chosen specifically because it describes something inanimate, like a table, so it generates very low emotional resonance. And the experiment was really meticulous. They controlled for the room temperature, time of day, the specific instructions they gave people, just to make sure the only real variable was the emotional charge of the word being said.
And what did the numbers show? What were the quantitative results?
The results were highly consistent across multiple studies. Repeating the conventional swear word, like fuck, significantly increased what they call pain threshold.
The threshold being the time until you first feel pain.
Exactly. The time until the participant first reports feeling pain. And that time increased by about 32%.
32%. So the amygdala response literally delayed the onset of pain perception. That's a huge change in the body's internal clock for discomfort.
It is. And maybe even more important for that guy at the gym, it increased pain tolerance. That's the total length of time the participant could keep their hand in that excruciatingly cold water. And that increased by 33%.
So these numbers are solid. Swearing doesn't just make you feel tougher mentally, it fundamentally changes the neurobiological response to physical pain and allows the body to endure more.
That's what the data says.
That is really compelling evidence that the chemical cascade is working just as predicted. But I imagine the researchers needed to prove this wasn't just some general emotional release or maybe just a novelty thing. How did they rule out simple distraction?
That's the critical next step. They conducted a follow-up experiment where they invented 2 new swear words.
They made them up.
Made them up from scratch.
Yeah.
One was fooch, which was chosen because it sounds a bit like a real swear word, so it might have some emotional resonance. And the other was twizpipe, which was chosen for its humorous, distracting potential. They were essentially creating novel linguistic violations.
So they manufactured a fake social rule to break just to see if the mechanism was the sound of the word or the novelty of breaking a rule?
Precisely. And participants did rate both of these new words as being significantly more emotional and more humorous than the neutral control word, solid. So the words did generate an emotional and humor rating.
But what happened in the ice water?
Nothing. When they were subjected to the cold pressor test, neither Fooch nor Twispipe had any beneficial effect whatsoever on pain threshold or pain tolerance.
Yeah.
The 32 to 33% benefit completely vanished.
Okay, that is the central finding, isn't it? It proves the power is not in the syllables, it's not in the novelty, it's not in the momentary shock value. It has to be something deeper.
It points directly back to deep learned associations, to that aversive classical conditioning we talked about. Conventional swear words get their power because they've been imprinted on our brains, often under conditions of high emotion or punishment, since we were children.
Right.
The word becomes functionally, physically linked to the sympathetic nervous system and the limbic system. These new made-up words, they lack those decades of learned effective weight. They don't have that hardwired association with autonomic arousal.
So the governor, that comps filter, is silenced by the weight of a lifetime of being told not to say that one specific word.
Exactly. And they also look specifically into that distraction hypothesis. The common wisdom is that people swear to distract themselves from pain.
Sure.
And while the analysis confirmed that people did rate conventional swearing as more distracting than the neutral word, the subsequent mediation analysis was definitive. Distraction was not a significant mediator for the pain relief effects.
So that pretty much kills the cognitive explanation. The effect is truly biological. It's a precognitive emotional trigger, not a conscious distraction technique.
It strongly supports the neurobiological model. The word has enough emotional horsepower built up by decades of social constraint to fire that amygdala alarm and change your pain response, even if you aren't consciously trying to distract yourself at all.
This inherent conflict, this ancient body system trying to break free of a modern social rule, it ties directly into a broader psychological framework, doesn't it? The evolutionary mismatch hypothesis.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
The evolutionary mismatch hypothesis argues that a lot of our modern mental distress and dysfunctional behaviors come from this fundamental clash, the clash between our ancient biological and psychological adaptations.
Which evolved over millennia for a hunter-gatherer world.
And the radically different environment of modern industrialized societies.
We are quite literally trying to operate ancient survival software on brand new, high-speed hardware, and it's glitching.
And evolution is slow, incredibly slow. We measure adaptive change in massive timescales. Take dog domestication. That process, which significantly altered canine behavior in their anatomy, took somewhere between 10,000 and 20,000 years.
Generations and generations of slow, incremental change.
Right. Now, compare that pace to the speed of modern technological and societal change.
There's no comparison.
The advancements since the Industrial Revolution follow a steep hockey stick curve. It's exponential growth squeezed into a tiny historical moment. I mean, the mainstreaming of the internet and the rise of constant social media notification loops, that happened over maybe 10 to 20 years.
Yeah.
Our brains just have not genetically caught up to that pace.
So our ancient algorithms are just completely overwhelmed?
They are. Cognitive biases that once helped us survive, like prioritizing immediate danger or seeking confirmation of what we already believe, they're now constantly being exploited.
Weaponized even.
Weaponized by things like social media algorithms that reward negativity and outrage because those things generate engagement. And that creates this constant state of low-grade emotional arousal that our ancient threat systems were never designed to handle 24/7.
So how does this systemic mismatch explain the power of a taboo word?
Because linguistic taboos, which are enforced socially and culturally, like the one that says you don't scream profanities in a quiet gym, they function as modern societal constraints that are imposed on a primal neurobiological system. Okay, the gym scenario is the perfect manifestation of this mismatch. You have an ancient survival circuit, the amygdala and the sympathetic nervous system, which was designed for short-term, maximum power survival bursts.
And it's being intentionally constrained by a relatively new conscious frontal lobe rule. Maintain composure, be polite.
The governor is prioritizing long-term somatic maintenance. Don't injure your back lifting too much. Maintain your social standing. It's playing the long game.
Right.
And the violation of that strong learned social boundary, which you achieve through that effective linguistic area in the right brain, provides the specific high arousal jolt needed to trick the ancient brain systems. The emotional weight of that forbidden word overrides the governor's slow, rational algorithm for safety. It convinces the amygdala that this is an immediate, critical survival scenario that requires unrestrained output.
This is error management theory in action. You're making a calculated error, violating a social rule as a costly signal to your own body that the stakes are high enough to shift from long-term maintenance to a short-term power burst.
It's harnessing strategic irrationality. You are momentarily sacrificing rational thought and social constraint to achieve a peak physical action.
So if the conscious mind is the filter that sets these rational limits and protects the governor, we have to go back to the subconscious mind. We have to talk about its, frankly, frightening vulnerability to influence, especially when that influence touches on these primal, taboo topics.
Well, we know it's powerful, that 90% of the iceberg processing 4 million bits a second.
Yeah.
But why is it so open to manipulation?
Yeah.
Because of its literal thinking style and its complete lack of a critical, rational filter. The subconscious doesn't judge, it doesn't analyze, doesn't plan, it just absorbs and accepts. And that makes it incredibly open to persuasion and belief, which is why it is the primary target for advertisers and other kinds of programmers.
It's the control center for most of our actions, even when we consciously believe we're making a rational choice.
Which brings us to the world of subliminals, messages that are delivered below the threshold of consciousness, designed specifically to bypass that conscious, rational filter.
The subconscious basically has no privacy settings.
None. It gorges itself on every visual cue, whether you consciously registered it or not. Advertisers have known for decades that our conscious mind filters heavily, so they embed imagery to communicate directly with the subconscious, ensuring that the critical, cautious governor remains blissfully unaware that any manipulation is even happening.
And the most effective hidden messages, they always revolve around the most deeply repressed, socially taboo topics.
Death and sex.
The big two.
They are the primal levers, because they relate directly to our two fundamental, non-negotiable evolutionary drives, survival and procreation. And they're powerful precisely because, in modern society, we have placed so many complex cultural and religious taboos around them that repression gives them massive emotional weight.
So when advertisers say covertly embed sexual imagery like the word sex or suggestive shapes etched into ice cubes in a magazine ad for alcohol, what is the subconscious actually processing?
It's instantly linking that primal procreative urge to the product in a totally unfiltered way. The conscious mind just sees an expensive bottle of gin. The subconscious mind sees an irresistible link to a primal reward.
And that drives impulse buying, based purely on this deep primal association that was established completely below your level of awareness.
Exactly.
But what about death imagery? I've seen examples of like hidden skulls or dice hidden in beverage ads. That seems counterintuitive for a product that's supposed to be about having fun.
That is perhaps the most strategic sabotage of the governor you can imagine. The death imagery communicates directly with the subconscious, and it overrides all the conscious thoughts about long-term planning, about health, about caution. The hidden message delivered below awareness is basically, mortality is inevitable. You're going to die anyway, so let loose. Roll the dice. Indulge right now.
Wow, it completely negates the rational, cautious thought process that says, I need to plan for the future. This product is potentially toxic.
The combination of death, the ultimate risk, and dice, which represent arbitrary fate, is a complete programming attempt designed to short-circuit the CEO, to short-circuit the governor.
And that mechanism is functionally identical, isn't it? Whether it's a $1 million ad campaign or a guy under a bench press.
It's the same principle. Advertisers use hidden taboo imagery to bypass conscious filtering and influence your action, which is buying. The weightlifter utters a taboo word in a high-stakes moment to bypass the logic of his own conscious mind, the governor, connecting directly to the deep, primal emotional systems
amygdala.
and influencing the physical outcome, which is a burst of strength. Both are seeking a direct, unfiltered emotional shortcut to maximize an immediate, desired action.
This has been a truly comprehensive exploration of the human safety code and the linguistic key that seems to unlock it.
What's really fascinating here, if we sort of synthesize all these findings, is that the raw, unfiltered power we can sometimes access isn't the result of just losing control or descending into some base emotion. It's actually a strategic, though often accidental, neurobiological takeover.
To take over.
And it's initiated by a high arousal signal, the taboo word, which is potent precisely because it has been imbued with decades of intense emotional and social prohibition. That learned effective charge is what allows the word to successfully trigger the sympathetic fight-or-flight cascade and briefly silence the rational restraining function of the conscious mind.
So it's the ultimate loophole in our brain's sophisticated safety software.
The true governor at the end of the day, isn't a physical limit of your body's musculature or your respiration. It's a highly complex, learned, and socially reinforced linguistic boundary in the brain. And it turns out our deepest, most forbidden words are the perfect key to unlock the vault.